Today, we are going to take a look at 3 stories in this order. First, the Capitol rioters are using excuses before the judges they are facing. The judges aren't buying it. We're going to take a look at what they said and what they are trying to do. Next, we are going to take a look at Rachel Powell, the pink hat protester from Western PA. There's been an update in her case. I'm going to let you know what that is. Finally, we're going to take a look at the Derek Chauvin case. Derek Chauvin is the man accused of killing George Floyd. There has been an update in his trial that is very interesting. Thank you everybody for tuning in. I'm Joe Pometto, Joe the Lawyer. If you like my content, please like, subscribe, comment, and share. Trying to get to 1,000 subscribers, so go ahead, hit that subscribe button. Most of my viewers are not subscribed. One of the traditions that we have on the show is we do a same time sip. That's right, we take a sip of a drink together before we watch the content. So everybody raise your cup, your glass in the air. I have coffee today, the nectar of the gods. It tastes better when we sip together. Cheers. First the coffee, then the justice. First the coffee, then the justice. For those of you who don't know me, I'm a practicing criminal defense attorney in Western Pennsylvania out of Pittsburgh, PA. I present the news from a legal perspective. We're going to take legal news. You're going to hear what an actual attorney has to say about these things, not a journalist. Okay, so the first story, Capitol riot defendants facing jail have regrets. Judges aren't buying it. For many accused of attempting to obstruct the certification of the U.S. presidential election on January 6, arrest was a reality check. Now they are getting another. As defendants charged in the Capitol siege have been coming through court, some have been shifting blame onto former President Donald Trump, downplaying their actions or expressing remorse. But federal judges, particularly those who work a few blocks from the Capitol, aren't buying it. Yeah, you don't want to get that judge. He's right down the street. One judge called a defendant's claim of civil disobedience detached from reality. Another verbally smacked down an attorney who tried to use the QAnon conspiracy theory to explain his client shouting, "Kill them all." Other judges have been giving defendants civic lessons on how democracy works. U.S. District Judge Beryl Howe, the chief federal jurist for the District of Columbia, responded incredulously to one defense attorney who said his client believed Mr. Trump requested his unlawful conduct. She said if a president could sanction overturning an election, he would be no different from a king or a dictator. And that is not how we operate here. I have to agree with her. When the attorney added that the man, the accused leader of a Proud Boys group, had been chastened rather than emboldened by the federal charges and his anti-government fever has broken, Judge Howe clapped back. Essentially, that's what your argument is, saying, "Whoops, now?" Judge Howe asked, has he expressed any remorse or rejection of his membership in the Proud Boys, a gang of nationalist individuals? Does he reject the fantasy the election was stolen? Does he regret the positions that animated the mob on January 6? Is there anything on the record about any of those things? Whoops is essentially what many of the accused are now saying. Through attorneys, at least 6 of the relatively small number of defendants arguing for release from jail pending trial have claimed that their disillusionment with Mr. Trump should be considered as a factor. Some, like the horned QAnon shaman Jacob Chansley, have cast themselves as both victims and perpetrators. Look, that guy's costume, woo, we're going to see that forever. It's going to go down in history. It will be in history textbooks. He said, "Please be patient with me and other peaceful people who, like me, are having a very difficult time piecing together all that happened to us, around us, and by us," he said in a public statement. "We are good people who care deeply about our country." Mr. Chansley, after failing to get a pardon from the president, offered to testify against him in the impeachment trial. Some tie their delusions to involvement with militant right-wing groups and the consumption of far-right news, both of which amplified baseless claims that the election was illegitimate and that Mr. Trump would retake power by force. Jessica Watkins, a 38-year-old member of the Oath Keepers group from Woodstock, Ohio, intended not to overthrow the government, but to support what she believed to be the lawful government. Public Defender Michelle Peterson of Washington argued in court filings she fell prey to the false and inflammatory claims of the former president, his supporters, and the right-wing media. Friends and family of Ms. Watkins echoed that claim in court filings. One described her as brainwashed by those deeply entrenched in conspiratorial beliefs. Ms. Watkins is accused of involvement in a conspiracy among Oath Keepers and their associates to storm the Capitol building. Prosecutors point to comments she made about fighting and dying as evidence they planned to capture and possibly harm lawmakers. Dominic Pizzola, a New Yorker, says he got involved with the Proud Boys last fall and had honorable intentions when he used a police riot shield to break a window at the Capitol. His attorney last week, wrote he believed he was protecting his country. Mr. Pizzola now recognizes he was duped into these mistaken beliefs and is consumed with guilt. Boy, people always see the truth once they're facing down federal court prison sentences. Prosecutors say Mr. Pizzola was among the first people to charge through barricades onto Capitol grounds, reach the building's walls, and flood its West Plaza. Once there, he acknowledges he confronted police and grabbed a riot shield, becoming the first to breach a window that rioters could enter through. Judges have yet to rule on Mr. Pizzola and Ms. Watkins' bids for release, but Judge Howe rejected an argument by attorneys for accused Kansas City Proud Boy William Cressman that his conduct at the Capitol was authorized by the president. President Trump for 4 years bragged that if he murdered someone on Fifth Avenue, his followers would still follow him, she said, and added, so if President Trump instructed members of the Proud Boys gang to murder somebody and they did, that would be a legal excuse and immunize them from liability for any criminal act? No, it would not, but it might pull in everybody who planned the act. Prosecutors have not asked to detain the bulk of about 250 rioters charged federally, many of whom are accused of only misdemeanor trespassing, have no criminal record, and have shown work, family, and community ties or public or military service. Judges also have pushed back at jailing individuals whose crimes do not involve violence. And look, that's true for the general public in all crimes. Many have been spared jail unless they have been alleged to be one of the individuals who banged down doors, sprayed pepper spray or bear spray at law enforcement officers, injured law enforcement officers, poked out eyes of police in the building, as one judge recited in releasing a commissioner of a county in New Mexico pending trial. There were like a lot of actual politicians down there. But in detaining about 54 individuals on grounds that they pose a risk of flight, danger to the community, or are charged with certain violent offenses, in weighing requests to modify release conditions, courts have given urgent civic lessons, educating defendants and the public on the real-life functioning of American democracy as opposed to the fever dreams of partisan manipulators, i.e. the internet. American democracy didn't always exist. It started with the Declaration of Independence and the Revolutionary War, followed by the Articles of Confederation. That original founding document contained one branch of government, a Congress. It proved insufficient. U.S. Magistrate Philip Lamons began a detention order for flagged Florida State Leader Oath Keeper Kelly Meggs. A lot of these people are kind of similar to sovereign citizens. After a rebellion, founders agreed on a stronger government with 3 branches, an electoral college, and certification of winners by both houses of Congress and the vice president, Judge Lamons wrote. What happened on January 6th wasn't one on an entire branch of our government, wasn't just one on an entire branch of our government, but it was an attack on the very foundation of our democracy. Mr. Meggs' attorney, David Wilson, declined to comment. Close to the Capitol. Judge Howe, as chief judge, has reviewed a particularly large number of Capitol cases, including appeals of detention rulings by lower courts nationwide, as well as her own assigned defendants. A former longtime top Senate Judiciary Committee staffer, whose courthouse office looks onto friends and former colleagues at the Capitol 3 blocks away, Judge Howe has noted how January 6th has turned parts of the capital city into a militarized fortress surrounded by razor-top fencing and roadblocks, off limits both to city residents and visitors. How fast can you read? In the QAnon case, Howe rejected an attorney's explanation that when his client shouted, "Kill them all" in the Capitol, referring to lawmakers, He didn't mean he would do so personally, but that he believed lawmakers would be executed by proper authorities in a judgment day apocalypse. Holy heck! QAnon believers will confront facts and reality in court, she said. What happened January 6th is no fantasy for people inside the Capitol or for people in the country. The defendant is entitled to his beliefs. He can believe the QAnon theory. He can believe the earth is flat. He can believe what he wants, but he is not entitled to break the law. And let me tell you, ladies and gentlemen, I've followed the sovereign citizen movement for years. When the law hits them in the face, that will give them the reality check. One of Howe's predecessors as Chief Judge, U.S. District Judge Roy C. Lamberth, similarly told attorneys for a pair of defendants that characterizing their behavior as mere trespassing or civil disobedience is both unpersuasive and detached from reality. Judge Lamberth, former Army captain and prosecutor appointed to the federal bench in 1987, ordered detained Lisa Eisenhart and Eric Munchel, a mother and son who prosecutors say allegedly entered the Capitol in tactical gear and armed with a stun gun, searching for traitors. Defense attorneys for Munchel and Eisenhart argued that the president invited all Americans into the Capitol. Judge Lamberth rejected that argument. By word and deed, Eisenhart and Munchel supported the violent overthrow of the United States government and pose a clear danger to our republic. Indeed, few offenses are more threatening to our way of life. So, interesting article. Maybe I'm beating this to death, but it's just so fascinating. A couple of things that I would like to point out here. If you watch the impeachment trial, I'm going to point out three things here. If you watch the impeachment trial, the Democratic managers often, when trying to determine whether or not Donald Trump incited the riot, they said, well, let's look to what the rioters themselves have said. And a lot of the rioters in court, and a bunch of the quotes that I just read you said, oh, Donald Trump ordered me to do it. I thought I was doing it to put the legitimate government back in place. I thought the president was telling us it was okay. And the impeachment managers relied on that as evidence of Trump's guilt. Well, it's interesting now that federal district court judges will not accept those excuses to take guilt off of the rioters. They will not accept those excuses to take guilt off of the rioters, whereas the Capitol impeachment managers were trying to say, well, Trump did this, look at what the rioters said. Well, the federal judges are saying, we don't care what Trump said or did. The individual people are the ones at fault. In a country where the First Amendment is foremost, I believe the correct track and tactic here is to hold the people who actually committed these crimes responsible. I do think that the courts are correct in holding the people who are accused of violence in jail with either high bonds or no bonds, whereas the people who entered the building but didn't commit any acts of violence, they should still be charged but not necessarily held in jail prior to trial. Finally, I believe that all these individuals should be held accountable. It is hard to doubt that conspiracy theories played a role here, and perhaps, even Donald Trump's language played a role here. Ultimately, though, the individuals are the ones responsible. The law, hopefully, will give them a reality check. It would be helpful for them, and maybe they haven't shown remorse yet, but when and if they plead guilty or are found guilty, it would be smart for them to denounce these conspiracy theories, state why and how they are false, accept responsibility, and show remorse for what happened. That would help them greatly when it comes to sentencing. It won't help them when it comes to guilt or innocence, but it will help them greatly when it comes to sentencing. It's going to be interesting to see if any of these cases go to trial, how many do, if any of them do. Maybe none of them will. I bet a few of them actually do go to trial. Those people will likely get the worst sentences if they actually lose at trial. So I respect the federal court judges' approaches here. I agree that these excuses are not sufficient, and we will see how this plays out.